Fall 3 times.
If you want.
Okay.
My teacher once said not to teach anybody until they've meditated, so let's meditate first. Okay. He said if you don't meditate, you won't understand the word. Okay, find a comfortable position with your back straight. Place your hands in your lap and close your eyes. Start with thoughts of goodwill. Tonight's talk is going to be on sublime attitudes, and goodwill is the first. So let's start with that. Goodwill is a wish for happiness, true happiness. And because true happiness comes from within, your true happiness doesn't have to conflict with anyone else's. So you can have goodwill all around without hypocrisy. So pose that thought in your mind, may I be truly happy? Because true happiness comes from within, this is not a selfish thought. In fact, the more you can develop your inner resources for finding happiness, the more you have to offer to others. And then spread thoughts of goodwill to people who are close to your heart, your family, your very close friends. May they find true happiness too. And then let that thought spread out in ever-widening circles, and people you know well and like. People you like even though you don't know them so well. People you're more neutral about. And people you don't like. Remember that the world would be a much better place if everyone could have true happiness inside. And if you place limits on your goodwill, you're placing limits on your mind. So don't let your likes and dislikes get in the way. When we wish goodwill for others is basically a wish that they will understand the causes for true happiness and be able to act on them, which is a thought you can extend to anyone. And spread thoughts of goodwill to people you don't even know. And not just people, living beings of all kinds, east, west, north, south, above and below, out to infinity. May we all find true happiness in our hearts. Now bring your attention to the breath. As I'll be talking tonight, when you spread goodwill to others, it's good to have a foundation in the body, a comfortable foundation in the body in the present moment. And the breath is the best way to develop that foundation, because the way you breathe is going to have a huge impact on how you sense your body. Take a couple of good long, deep in and out breaths and notice how that feels. And if it feels comfortable, keep it up. If it doesn't feel comfortable, you can change the rhythm. Have shorter breathing, more shallow, heavier, lighter, faster, slower. Try to find what rhythm and texture of breathing feels best for the body right now. If your attention wanders away after a thought that's not related to the breath, just drop the thought and you'll be right back at the breath. If it wanders off again, drop that thought again. Return to the breath. Each time you come back to the breath, reward yourself with a breath that feels especially gratifying. Because when we talk about the breath here, it's not just the air coming in and out of the lungs. It's also the flow of energy in the body, which exists on many different levels. The most obvious is the energy that allows the breath to come in and go out to begin with. So think of that energy bathing the body in a way that feels good. Now when the breath gets comfortable, there is a tendency to get lazy and to drift off. So to counteract that tendency, the next step is to be aware of the whole body as you breathe in and the whole body as you breathe out. And a good way to build up to that whole body awareness is to go through the body first, section by section. So start down around the navel. Locate that part of the body in your awareness and watch it for a while as you breathe in and breathe out to see what kind of breathing feels good there. If you feel any tension or tightness in that part of the body, allow it to relax. See if you can keep it relaxed all the way through the in-breath, all the way through the out. And now move your attention up to the solar plexus, the area right in front of the stomach, and follow the same steps there. In other words, 1, locate that part of the body in your awareness. 2, watch it for a while as you breathe in, breathe out to see what rhythm of breathing feels good there. And 3, if there's any tension or tightness in that part of the body, allow it to relax so that no new tension builds up as you breathe in and you don't hold on to any tension as you breathe out. Now move your attention up to the middle of the chest in the area right around the heart, and follow the same steps there. And now move your attention to the base of the throat and follow the same steps there. And move your attention to the middle of the head. As you breathe in, think of breath energy coming in not only through the nose, but also through the eyes, the ears. In from the back of the head, down from the top of the head, going deep into the brain. Nourishing all the parts of the head that feel starved of energy, and dissolving away any patterns of tension you may feel in the jaws, around the forehead.
That again.
Now bring your attention to the back of the neck, right at the base of the skull. As you breathe in, think of the breath energy entering there and then going down to the shoulders and the arms, out to the tips of the fingers. And as you breathe out, think of it radiating out from all those parts of the body into the air. And as you get more sensitive to these parts of the body, if you notice that one side is holding more tension than the other, allow that side to relax. And see if you can keep it relaxed all the way through the in-breath, all the way through the out. Now keeping your attention focused at the back of the neck. This time as you breathe in, think of the breath energy entering there and going down both sides of the spine, all the way down to the tailbone. And as you breathe out, think of it radiating out from the entire back into the air. And again, if you notice more tension in one side of the back than the other, allow that side to relax, to bring things more into alignment. See if you can keep it relaxed, all the way through the in-breath, all the way through the out. Now bring attention to the tailbone. As you breathe in, think of the breath energy entering there and going down through the hips, down through the legs, out to the tips of the toes. And as you breathe out, think of it radiating out in all directions from all those parts of the body. Now that completes one cycle in the survey of the body. If you were meditating on your own, you could go through the body at your own pace as many times as you like. But for right now, choose one spot in the body that seems most congenial to stay focused. either because the breath feels especially good there or it's just easy for the mind to settle in there. Let your attention settle there, and then from that spot spread out to fill the whole body. So you're aware of the whole body breathing in, the whole body breathing out. The range of your awareness will have a tendency to shrink, especially on the out-breath. So remind yourself, each time you breathe in, whole body. Each time you breathe out, whole body. And let the breath find whatever rhythm feels best. Your only duty right now is try to maintain this centered but broad awareness. It's healing for the body, healing for the mind. And because it's centered and all around, it provides a good basis for insight to arise, so you can understand what's going on in your own mind. But for the time being, don't worry about the insights. Just try to make this foundation good. Now before you leave meditation, think thoughts of goodwill once more. Think of whatever sense of peace or well-being you felt during the meditation. And dedicate it to others, either specific people you know are suffering right now, or to all living beings in all directions. What in Thailand they call our companions in aging, illness, and death. In the midst of that, may we all find peace and well-being in our hearts. And if you'd like to continue meditating, you're welcome to. Otherwise, you can now open your eyes. One of the ironies of our life as human beings is that we all want happiness. And practically everything we do is for the sake of happiness, well-being. And yet we end up doing so many things that cause suffering. Can you hear me clearly? It's almost as if we aren't really taking our happiness that seriously. We do things and say, oh my gosh, that didn't work. We do something else, that didn't work. We don't seem to go about it in a organized or systematic way. Two of the main problems are on the one hand, we don't really know what will lead to true happiness. Or secondly, we learn and then we forget. We learn some lessons and then emotions come in, something catches our attention, and we forget what we learned from the past. And the Buddha is suggesting, and this is one of the basic points of his teaching, is that we really should take our happiness seriously. Because if you don't take your own happiness seriously, what do you take seriously? But he also says that when you take your happiness seriously, it's not a selfish thing. Because it so happens that the things that you do would lead to your true happiness are also conducive to true happiness for other people at the same time. The main problem is that we don't know what would lead to true happiness, and we forget when we do know. And when you hear sometimes when the Buddha talks about how things are impermanent, these are the 2 points where impermanence really is a danger. It's not the fact that things change, the fact that the weather changes is not a big problem. The fact that this temple wasn't here and is now is here, that's not a problem. The fact is that on the one hand, we work hard to find happiness in some things and then it doesn't last. It's not worth the effort that we put into it. And the other problem with inconstancy or impermanence is that our minds can change so quickly. And the Buddha, who was an expert in finding analogies for things, he said there is no analogy for how quickly your mind can change. You're in love with someone and then a second later, you hate the person. You get a new car, and you like it, someone puts a scratch in it, and that's the end. The car is no longer any good. So the mind is so quick to change and quick to forget. So that's one of the dangers of inconstancy. So it's the fact that we work hard for things and then sometimes you can devote years to a particular type of happiness and then it just disappears. That's one place where impermanence is bad. And the other is the fact that your mind can change so quickly. And the Buddha is recommending 2 qualities of mind to develop in order to counteract these problems. The first is discernment or wisdom. And the second is mindfulness. In terms of wisdom, he said that wisdom begins with the question, what when I do it will lead to my long-term welfare and happiness? And the wisdom there is, one, you realize that happiness depends on your actions. It doesn't just come floating by. And then secondly, you want long-term rather than short-term. Because short-term will turn into something else. And if it's not happiness, it's not going to be something good. And so you realize, if I want to be truly happy, I have to give myself to something that will give long-term happiness, and it depends on my actions. And you think about this a little bit more, and the fact that if you want your happiness to last, it can't depend on the suffering of other people. There's a nice story in the canon. There's a king and his queen were alone in the bedroom one night. And in a romantic moment, the king turns to the queen and says, "Is there anyone you love more than yourself?" And you know what he's expecting. That she's going to say, "Yes, Your Majesty, I love you more than myself." And if this were Hollywood, that's probably what she's saying. But this is a polycanon. And the queen was no fool, and she says, "No, there's nobody I love more than myself. How about you?" And the king has to admit there's no one he loves more than himself. So that's the end of that scene. Doesn't go anywhere. Doesn't go where the king thought it would. And so the king goes down to see the Buddha. And he tells the Buddha what the queen said. And he said, "You know, she's right. You could search the whole world and you would never find anyone that you love more than yourself. At the same time, though, everybody else loves themselves just as fiercely as you love yourself." Now, instead of saying that it's a dog-eat-dog world out there and just grab what you can, he's saying, when you think in this way, you should realize never do anything that will harm anyone else. Because if your happiness or your attempts for happiness harm other people, they're not going to stand for it. They're going to do what they can to destroy your happiness. So wisdom here is the basis for goodwill. We have to wish for other people's happiness and think about where can I find happiness in a way that doesn't harm anyone else, because I want happiness that lasts. So your true well-being and their well-being are interconnected in this way. As for mindfulness, many times you hear that mindfulness is defined as non-reactive awareness or non-judgmental awareness. Actually, the Buddha himself defined it as the ability to keep something in mind, to hold something in your memory, especially when you need to apply it to what you're doing right now. And that's what mindfulness does. As you strengthen your mindfulness, then when you've learned things from the past, then you can remember to apply them now in the present moment, regardless of what your emotions are saying. And it's in this context that the Buddha taught what he called the sublime attitudes, the topic of tonight's talk. In Pali, the word sublime attitudes means Brahma Vihara. Now, Brahmas are a level of beings up in heaven, and it's about as high as you can get without being awakened. And they live with attitudes of infinite goodwill, infinite compassion, infinite empathetic joy, and infinite equanimity. These are the attitudes that they have that maintain themselves in that level of happiness up in heaven. And the Brahma Viharas, the Buddha says, you don't have to be a Brahma in order to have these attitudes. You can develop them as a human being. So let's go down and think about the Brahma Viharas for a minute. Goodwill, the first one, metta, is a wish for happiness. And you want the happiness to be true. And you want the happiness to spread around to other people. Now this means not only that you wish for people to be happy, but also you wish for them to create the causes that will lead to happiness. In other words, you want people to be generous, you want people to be harmless, you want people to be good to one another. And it means you also, if you have goodwill for yourselves, it also means that you want to do the things that will lead to happiness as well. Compassion is what goodwill feels when it sees suffering. Whether it's your suffering or someone else's, you want the suffering to end if possible. And again, this applies not only to people who are sad right now, but people who are doing things that will lead to suffering. You would like to see them stop. So that's having compassion for them. So it takes the principle of karma, in other words, that people are happy or unhappy based on their actions. It takes it seriously. So you're happy not only for people who are happy, which is what empathetic joy is about, but you're also happy for people who are doing things that lead to happiness. You feel compassion not only for people who are sad or suffering right now, but also compassion for people doing things that are going to lead to suffering. When we express these thoughts, there's a chant that's chanted almost every night in almost every Buddhist monastery in the Theravada world, which is, may all beings be happy, may they be free from suffering, and may they not lose the happiness they have. Now notice all those thoughts are expressed with may this be, may this be. Equanimity, though, the fourth Brahma Vihara, is different. Equanimity is the realization that there are times when you wish for other people's happiness and they're not going to do what will actually lead to happiness. And there's no way you can force them. Or in your case, there are times when you would like to be happy, but you find yourself there, you've got some past actions that are leading to things that are making it difficult for you right now. Okay, you treat that with equanimity. In other words, you don't focus on things that you can't change. so that you will save your energy and use your energy to focus on things that you can. Equanimity is not hard-heartedness or total indifference. It's simply the realization there are some things that you cannot change in the direction you'd like to see them, so you just put them aside and then you focus on things that you can change. So on the one hand you have goodwill, compassion, empathetic joy, which are the willing side of the Brahma-viharas. And then equanimity is kind of the realization that, okay, there's some things you just have to put to the side so that you can focus on the areas where you can make a change. Now these attitudes, we have these attitudes to some extent. As a human being, you have to have goodwill for somebody, you have compassion for some people, you have empathetic joy for some people, you're equanimous about other people. But it's hard for us to feel these things for all living beings without limit. This is why the attitudes have to be developed consciously. Because if you don't develop them consciously, then you can't really trust yourself when you're acting with someone that you really dislike intensely. You can't trust yourself to act in a skillful way. You end up creating bad karma for yourself, you end up creating a mess in the world outside. So you want to be able to develop these attitudes as you can so that you can apply them whenever they're needed. So say in a case when a loved one is sick and you realize, okay, you can't cure the illness, you've got to work then on being equanimous toward the illness and then focusing what you can do to help that person in other ways. So you want to be able to call on these attitudes when they're appropriate. And this is where the Buddha's teachings on something called fabrication come in. He said, we tend to create mind states, he says, in using three things. One is simply by the way we breathe. If you breathe heavily for 5 minutes, you'll have one kind of mind state. You breathe gently for another 5 minutes, you'll have another kind of mind state. A lot of your emotions are basically thoughts that get into your breath. Anger comes and there's going to be a switch in your breath and you find yourself, the breath feels very uncomfortable. And after a while you say, this anger I have, I've got to get it out of my system. Now for most of us, getting it out of our system means either yelling at somebody, doing something outside, or the other alternative would be to bottle it up, neither of which works. Because when you bottle it up, it turns into The Thing. You remember that movie? The Thing? It would go underground and grab you, And so a lot of times your anger, when you bottle it up, just does that. It comes out some other side. And so one of the reasons we work with the breath, as I recommended right now, is that gives you a third alternative. You don't have to let the anger out through unskillful actions, and you don't have to bottle it up. You can breathe through it and disperse the energy that is built up in the breath around the anger. So the breath, the way we breathe, is one of the ways in which we create a certain mind state. And we can learn to breathe in ways that will be more conducive to more skillful mind states. That's one. The second way we create a mind state is simply about the way we talk to ourselves about it. How could she do that? She's my friend. I thought she was my friend. Why could she do that? Why did she just... We can talk about this for hours. And where does it get you? It gets you all worked up. So what you need to do is think in new ways. Maybe she has a headache, Give her the benefit of the doubt. That's the second way. The third way that we create our mind states is through feelings of pleasure or pain, either pleasure or pain that we feel in the body. Feelings of pleasure or pain, neither pleasure nor pain. And these, of course, can be related to your breath, or they're related to the way you think. And then there are perceptions. These are the images that go into the mind. Kind of like subliminal messages on TV. Something will flash into your mind. You see your boss and you see monster, That's going to affect the way you relate to your boss. You see a little rabbit and you think, oh, isn't the little rabbit cute? Little rabbits can eat all your vegetables, Just because they look that way or you have that perception doesn't mean that the perception is going to be real. But we do have these things we apply. This happened at the monastery. Several years back we had one ground squirrel. And it was a cute ground squirrel, so the monks fed it. And then we noticed it was getting fat. And it wasn't just fat, it was pregnant. And it's now the grandmother of this huge colony of ground squirrels, which is going to undermine civilization. They just dig through and dig through the mountain. So the emotions you have these little images that kind of come into the mind and will have an effect on how you relate to other people. And so what you need to do to develop the Brahma Vihara is if you notice that you're feeling ill will for someone, you have to ask yourself, okay, how am I breathing around this? What thoughts am I generating in my mind about this person? And also, what are the images that come into my mind when I see this person or think about this person? Can I change that? The easiest thing to change is the breath. This is one of the reasons we do breath meditation. You find yourself in a difficult situation, breathe calmly. Breathe in a way that dissolves the tension in the body, like I was recommending just now. Once you don't have that feeling that it's built up inside, then you can look more objectively at your own mind. How am I talking to myself about this person? Is what I'm saying fair? Is it useful? The Buddha has recommendations for speech, and they're useful for thoughts as well. The first question is it true? If it's not true, why think it? Secondly, even if it's true, is it beneficial? This may not be beneficial. Maybe I can drop it then. And then the third one, is this the right time and place for that? There are lots of things that are true or beneficial, but this is the wrong time. So learn how to say, okay, I can put this thought aside for the time being. Learn to think about the situation in different ways. And then finally there are its perceptions. Try to get sensitive to the perceptions that you bring to a situation when you're dealing with a person. What image do you hold in your mind? When you see some people, you're going to be thinking of your mother. When you see other people, you're going to be thinking of your father. People from the past tend to pop up, or our images of people, relationships we've had in the past, experiences we've had in the past, tend to get applied to the people that we meet. And that can color everything for good or bad. So ask yourself, how can I color it in a way that's going to be good, that will be useful? So this is how you use these three things: the way you breathe, the way you talk to yourself about the situation, and then the images that you bring to your mind around the situation. Can you consciously change them? And if you can use this knowledge to create a sense of goodwill whenever you need it, compassion whenever you need it, empathetic joy whenever you need it. In other words, there are times when you feel ill will for someone, you say, I've got to change this because otherwise I'm going to be doing things that are unskillful. I've got to change this attitude. If you see someone who's suffering and you think, boy, now's my chance to give it to them hard, okay, you say, no, I've got to have compassion for this person, they're suffering. Or if you see someone doing something really unskillful, you don't just go up and fight them, you say, how can I help this person to stop being unskillful? Think about it as a way of helping them rather than just fighting them. See someone who's got some happiness that you don't have, you don't want to be jealous, you don't want to resent that. Because again, suppose someday you gain this happiness. Do you want other people to resent you? No. So you want to be able to bring the proper attitude to whatever situation you find yourself in. And so it's useful to learn how to develop these three aspects I mentioned: the breath, the way you talk to yourself about the situation, and then finally the perceptions, the images that you have in mind around the situation. Try to consciously change those. Now to help in this, to help keep this in mind, and also to help you have some decent ideas about how to apply it in your life, the Buddha talks about helps you in three ways. The first one is in his teachings on the precepts. There are 5 precepts. The first one is not to kill anything, anybody. Secondly is not to steal anything. The third is not to have illicit sex. The fourth is not to tell lies, in other words, to consciously or intentionally misrepresent the truth. And then the fifth is not to take intoxicants. And these are the Buddha's kind of shorthand recommendations for how to act in a way that shows goodwill for yourself and other people. In fact, it's interesting, he says, when you act in line with these 5 precepts, you are actually benefiting yourself. When you get other people to follow the 5 precepts, you're benefiting them. And the 5 precepts are kind of the basic common denominator and because they're short and simple, they're easy to keep in mind. So so that when you really do feel like killing somebody, it says, no. If you feel like stealing something, you say, I could get away with this? No. It's kind of like, if you lived here in Alaska 20 years ago, do you remember the bear awareness signs they used to have? Does anyone here remember the bear awareness signs? Yes. Okay. They used to have them up north for all the stupid people down in the lower 49 who don't know bears. And the bear awareness had 10 do's and don'ts. You see a bear, do not run. Because of course that's the first thing that's going to come into your mind, run. So it says, do not run. Secondly, raise your arms, look bigger than you are. Speak to the bear in a calm and reassuring voice. And it goes down, 1 through, and then finally it gets to the last one, okay? If the bear rushes you, lie down, play dead. But then the very last one, the one that really got me, was the one that said, if the bear starts chewing on you, try to notice, is the bear chewing out of curiosity or hunger? That's going to require a lot of mindfulness and alertness. But in most cases, the 1 through 9 will take care of most cases, most encounters with bears, right? And so the Buddha's 5 precepts are like 1 through 9. In other words, these are the do's and don'ts that you just remember to apply in all situations. And it's easy to keep those in mind. This is why the precepts are short and clear-cut, so that there's not a lot of waffling about. So, okay, whatever the situation is, I don't kill, I don't steal, I don't have illicit sex, I don't lie, and I don't take intoxicants. You make that promise to yourself if you really have goodwill for yourself and for the people around you. Now beyond that, of course, there are times when you have to develop your alertness and mindfulness so you can deal with that. In the last situation, the bear is chewing on you. You probably can think of some incidents in your life where it's like the bear is chewing on you. And you need something beyond, more than just simple precepts. You need to be very alert and mindful about what is the appropriate thing to do in this situation. And this is why we develop breath meditation, because it helps strengthen your mindfulness. And if you sit here and cannot keep your mind on the breath for 5 minutes, you're in trouble when you deal with difficult people. Because the breath is neutral. It doesn't have many difficulties. It's just in, out, comfortable, not comfortable, change, okay. That's it. That's all you need to work with. So it gives you something that's neutral and right with you that helps develop your mindfulness. So you can I'm going to keep this in mind, we're going to stay with the breath, and if I find myself wandering off, I'm going to come back. And your ability to develop this talent or to develop this skill then gets carried into other areas of your life so that you can hold things in mind as you walk into a difficult situation. We're developing not only mindfulness but also alertness. You're watching what's happening with the breath. You make changes, you immediately can see whether the change is for the good or for the bad. You develop that sensitivity to what's going on in your body right now. And that will also help you when you come to difficult situations where you need to generate some goodwill for someone who's really, really hard. So this is one of the ways in which breath meditation helps you, is it helps strengthen your mindfulness and your alertness. It also gives you a sense of well-being, because oftentimes the reason we're doing unskillful things is because we're looking for a quick hit of happiness wherever we can find it, because we feel starved. And we're already making ourselves miserable by the way we breathe, and so we just go out and grab for the happiness wherever we can get it. And sometimes the happiness is just that, in being cruel to other people. You take a certain perverse pleasure in being cruel. Or sometimes you don't think about being cruel, but you feel you're lacking something in your life and you just grab for something. And so working with the breath gives you a sense of well-being that you can take as a grounding, as a foundation, so you're not so starved for pleasure all the time. And then the third thing that's helpful about breath meditation is that it gets you more sensitive to these processes of what I call fabrication or sankhara, the way you breathe, the way you talk to yourself, and also the image that you're holding in mind. Because to stay with the breath, to begin with, you have to talk to yourself and stay with the breath, don't wander off, come right back, come on. Talk to yourself like this, and then you start noticing other conversations going on in the mind. And you get more sensitive, all these other conversations are there. It's like you have a whole committee inside here. And it's not the temple committee. It's the Chicago City Council, They've got all kinds of subterfuges. It's the lobbyists in Juneau, you know. And you get more sensitive to these different voices, and as you get more sensitive, then you can deal with them. Because otherwise they tend to stay in the background and they'll make little comments when you're not paying attention. And they can poison the water of the well in your mind. But if you're sensitive to what you're saying to yourself, then as difficult emotions come up and you see, okay, this way I'm talking to myself is not helpful right now, you can change the way you talk. And then finally with the perceptions, the images you hold in mind, you'll find that the way you perceive the breath, the image you have about the breath, will influence the way you sense the breathing. For instance, if you think that the breath is only the air that comes in and out through the nose, that will make it very difficult to do breath meditation, say when you have a cold. Or even just sitting here, in this sense that you've got this whole body to nourish and it's only two little holes right here. Whereas if you think of the breath energy coming in from all directions, through every pore of the skin, then the breath becomes a lot lighter, becomes a lot more spacious. Your sense of the body becomes more spacious. There's a town in California, Laguna Beach, they have a festival they call the Festival of the Arts, where they recreate famous paintings on a stage. And then they have a big revolving stage, you know, and sometimes they'll have paintings, sometimes they'll have statues. And they discovered very early on when they did statues, you know, they'd go down to the beach and get somebody good looking to be Venus or David. And they'd cover them with white paint. First they covered them all around with white paint. And they found that you get Venus on the stage for 2 minutes and she faints if she's covered with white paint. In other words, your skin really does breathe. They discovered that so for her not to faint, they had to keep her back not covered with a paint. In that way, so there's a breath energy that does come in and out the pores. So if you hold that perception in mind, it will change the way you sense the breathing. And you begin to realize just simply the way you relate to your breath is so dependent on these perceptions. The same principle applies to the way you relate to other people. And if you can change the perception of your breath, you can change your perceptions around other people. So the breath meditation gives you some hands-on experience in dealing with these different types of fabrication. The physical, what they call verbal, how you talk to yourself, and mental fabrication, which is the perceptions you hold in mind. So those are 3 of the ways in which breath meditation helps as you try to develop the Brahma Viharas. Strengthens your mindfulness, gives you a sense of well-being here in the present moment, so it's a lot easier to feel goodwill for other beings because you're feeling good inside yourself. And then finally it gives you some practice in these different ways in which you fabricate your mind state, so you can step back from a mind state and say, I'm putting this mind state together in a really stupid way, I can do this differently. All too often we think a feeling comes up very strongly and this is what you really feel. The question is, do you really feel that, or is that something you just habitually fabricate around that situation? And if you can think of, I can step back from this and fabricate it in a different way, this puts you more in charge of how you're going to be dealing with yourself and dealing with other people. Finally, and some of the help that the Buddha gives in developing these Brahma Viharas is his reminder that your life is shaped by your actions. Your actions are your treasures. Now, are they your treasures or are they your junk? I mean, look what kinds of actions you do in the course of the day. It's like the person who carries a suitcase around. What are you carrying in your suitcase in terms of the actions you've done in the course of the day? If you can develop the Brahma Viharas, your suitcase will have good things in it. It'll have treasures that are actually worth carrying around. Although the image in the canyon is that you don't have to carry your good karma around, it floats behind you. It's light. So if you develop the good Brahma Viharas, then your actions will be your treasures, and they'll be good actions. Secondly, he says also that not only the actions you're doing now and into the future, but if you develop these Brahma Viharas in an unlimited way, it has an impact on your mind so that even bad things you've done in the past are not going to affect you as strongly. The analogy he gives is of a lump of salt. If you put the lump of salt into a small cup of water, the water would be too salty to drink. But if you took that same lump of salt and put it into a clean river, and his image was the river Ganges, He said, you could still drink the water in the river because there's so much more water. In the same way, he says, the karma that comes in from the past where you've done unskillful things is like the lump of salt. If your mind is narrow, easily overcome by pleasure or pain, easily pushed around by your emotions, it's like that cup of water. But if your mind is more expansive, so that's not overcome by pleasure and not overcome by pain, it's like the water in the river. So the past karma coming back is not going to affect you nearly as hard. So goodwill provides you protection not only in the sense of what you will be doing, but also protects you from bad things you've done in the past. So you don't need to suffer as much. And this is one of the reasons why one of the most famous images that the Buddha gives about goodwill. He says, you should protect your goodwill as a mother would protect her only child. Even in very difficult situations. There's one point where he's talking to the monks and he says, if bandits were to pin you down and to start sawing off your arms and legs with a saw, he said, if you don't have goodwill for them, you're not following my teaching. It's not easy. But if you realize, okay, my goodwill is more valuable than my arms and legs, you hold on to your goodwill. In the same way that a mother would be willing to risk her life to protect her child, you should be willing to risk a lot of things so you can protect your goodwill. Because that will be your true treasure as you go through life. And then from this life on to future lives. So these are some of the ways in which the Buddha helps you try to keep these attitudes in mind. So that as you look at your life and try to figure out what kind of happiness do I want, you can think about, in terms of wisdom, what will be long-term. What can I do that will lead to long-term welfare and happiness? And then in terms of mindfulness, keeping these attitudes in mind so that whatever you learn that does lead to long-term welfare and happiness will be there to remind you at all times as you're making your choices as you go through the day. That's the end of the Dharma talk. Okay. Are there any questions before we break? Nothing? This is your last chance. I'm not going to be around too many more days. Yes.
What is the antidote for anger? How do I be rid of anger?
Okay, you go in different stages. And the first stage, the Buddha said, is to remind yourself, if you act on your anger, then you're going to be pleasing your enemy. And although he doesn't use the word, the question is, do you want to please that son of a bitch? We're talking here on a very basic level. But in other words, okay, if I act on this anger, I'm going to destroy myself. I'm going to do stupid things, and I'm going to regret it after I said it, and there will be people who would like to see me do stupid things. Do I want to please them? So that's the first thing to hold in mind. And then the second thing is, okay, the reason I'm not acting on the anger is because I have goodwill for myself. So have very strong goodwill for yourself. And then think about, okay, if I act on this anger, it's going to be bad. So I've got to have goodwill for the people around me. And so the Buddha says, in this particular case, you look at someone who's done something really bad and say, is there anything good they've done? And focus on that. The analogy the Buddha gives is of a person who is going through the desert and is very hot and tired and thirsty and comes across a little cow print with a little bit of water in the cow print. And he knows, okay, if I try to scoop it up, I'll get it muddy and I can't drink the water. I'll have to go down and slurp it up out of the cow print. Now that's a very undignified posture. But you say, okay, I need that water. And it's the same way, okay, I need to think about this person's good qualities, even though they've done other things that are really distasteful or I really dislike intensely. And I may feel that it's lowering myself to try to think good thoughts about that person, but I need it. Because I need the water of their goodness in order to nourish mine. So try to find something good in that person. And if you can't find anything good in that person at all, then you're just going to have compassion for that person. That person's creating a lot of bad karma. So these are the 3 ways to think to help overcome anger. Yes, Kathleen?
You mentioned about if someone's sick and you have to put aside that you can't control whatever that is. But how do you control, even though you know you can't control that, maybe you have anxiety about it, that they're going to die, or there's fear and anxiety that you're carrying inside yourself. And intellectually you know that you can't do anything about it. How do you dispel that?
Just remind yourself we're all going to die. And so prepare yourself mentally for that. Okay, in case this person dies, how am I going to handle it? If you're afraid to think about it, that's when you have a lot of fear and anxiety. But if you say, okay, there's going to be some point where this relationship will have to end, and it may be ending a lot sooner than I want it to. But learn to think about it so that you can say, okay, I can still kind of breathe through this and still be with it. Because all too often you think, I can't think about that, I can't think about that. And that just makes it bigger and bigger and bigger than it has to be. So allow yourself to think about that and say, okay, this person may die, in which case, is there any unfinished business I have with this person? Any things I would like to say, good things I would like to say to the person before they go? Say them now. So there's not the regret afterwards, oh, I wish I had told her how much I appreciated her, or I wish I had shown more kindness. Show the kindness now. And that makes it a lot easier to deal with the fear that comes up. Yes?
If a position causes you pain with meditating and distracts you, should you pick a different one?
Yes. However, you find yourself sitting with your spine is straight, your posture is perfect, and it's still painful, sit with it for a little while. Because it's good to be able to find a position where you can stay for long periods of time, because that allows the mind to get deeper. And as you work with the breath, especially work with the breath down the spine, you kind of straighten things out. If there's pain in your legs, often it's a sign that there's a blockage in the spine in terms of the breath energy. So try to think about opening up the channels as you go down the spine. And that might relieve the pain that you feel, say, in your legs or in your hips. So work with the breath first, but if it's really painful, so painful you can't focus on the breath, change your posture. Okay, well, thank you for your attention. I hope that this was helpful.
Count 3 times.
There should be books. There are books for free. Oh, you have a question? Yes. It's a reference to what are called the triple gem, which is the Buddha, and then the Dharma, which is his teaching, and then the Sangha, which are the his followers who've gained awakening. So it's in honor of them.